Good morning. So it's day 2 of week 7 out of a total of 18 weeks. So we're not even at the halfway mark yet, which is kind of cool. Whew. Out again in the morning in the woods. So, yeah. And I want to thank everybody again. We're well over 600 views. 5.3 thousand minutes of watch time and 20 subscribers, which is pretty cool. And the cool thing about that number of subscribers is the people that have subscribed are really watching it, which is ace. It's nice to be able to do something useful on YouTube, but like everything useful, I mean the truly useful stuff, not many people use it. It's interesting, isn't it? You know, there's lots of people on YouTube talking about absolutely nothing and getting millions of views, and yet there's a few you know, interested people that want some actual value out of their media, and they're really watching this, which is really helpful, because I mean occasionally there is the temptation to just give up and go back to it. It's like this constant pull of inertia and resistance, and that's trying to sort of like, you know, impinge your ability to do what you want. And I wonder why that is. And I think it's definitely down to a sense of satisfaction that people have, you know, on a basic reptilian brain level, where, you know, you've got access to enough food. I mean, if you're watching this and you've got an internet connection, the chances are you've got access to enough food, you've got shelter, you've got all kinds of things. So your lizard brain is basically going, that's enough, why should I do more? And yet you've got your mammalian brain that's overlaying sort of things like reproduce, make yourself as comfortable as possible. And then there's your frontal lobe that says, in some cases, that you should be doing something. And I've been lucky enough to do a bunch of things. I haven't lived a completely pedestrian life, but you know, you want to strive for more. And it is amazing that, you know, when you sit down and think about the power that you have, as opposed to someone, you know, like me, that remembers that, like, a general sense of powerlessness among, you know, your average bod. This idea that you couldn't do anything more than was set out for you. Which is pretty interesting. And now, of course, we've got more media than we can ever hope to watch. We seal ourselves out in our cultural bubbles and do nothing. There's a lot of resources made available to people producing media. And a lot of it seems really pointless. And fair enough, you're sitting there watching a YouTube channel going, yeah, you know, some of this is really pointless. But it's weird, you know, even in the 70s when I was a kid, which is a long time ago now, and a different culture altogether, there were still some people that were pushing, you know, and going, right, I deserve to know more. And one of those people was my dad, who, you know, wanted more, you know, even before computers existed and before the internet was available, before we had more than 3 channels of television in the UK. He was there working stuff out, So computers, came along, and I'd say in a very available sense, sometime in the early 80s. And just after that, just before that really, the Rubik's Cube appeared, and my dad managed to solve it. He's a brainy guy. Managed to sit down, work out a general solution from any position that would mean that you could solve the Rubik's Cube. Now, we're very used to people being able to solve things like the Rubik's Cube. It's almost a cliche now. We've got robots that can solve the Rubik's Cube. You can hook up an Arduino or Raspberry Pi to a bunch of servo motors and some Lego, and if you're smart enough you can solve the Rubik's Cube. It's no big thing. But at the time it came out, before Ernst Rubik had put together his invention, he'd sent it to a bunch of mathematicians who said, I'm not going to get out of here. This is the cool thing about wandering around in the woods. Is that you can't always predict your path. Metaphor for life. Anyway, so before the Rubik's Cube was developed, the guy who developed it, I think it's Ernesto, but Mr. Rubik sent it across to various mathematicians and scholars and stuff like that, and described the cube, and they all said it was impossible, and it couldn't be done, it couldn't be fixed. If the cube was randomly mixed up, a person wouldn't be able to solve it. And then within about a year or two, people were solving it. Something with millions of different combinations, and school children were solving it. And my dad managed to write a book, didn't get it published, because by the time he'd figured it out, people had written down solutions to it, and people were solving it in minutes. And now you can probably get a robot to solve it in seconds. So within a very short time frame, something considered impossible was rendered utterly possible. And then computers came along, and he was amazingly interested in that. Started writing programs, learned about machine code, and taught himself to program in his spare time. So fortunately, those sorts of things came along in pretty much the right time for him, his ability to do stuff. And now we're faced with, compared to that period in our history, which was less than 50 years ago, it's like 40 years ago, which when I was a kid was the previous time to that was the Second World War, prior even to rock and roll, before the electric guitar, stuff like that. And it is amazing, that because we share information much more readily now, the progress of invention and the progress of technology and the progress of individual, informational power is rapidly sped up. But my dad was a guy that was always going to tinker with stuff. He could always build electronic circuits and stuff like that. He could always figure stuff out. And yeah. So now we've got a situation where every couple of years a new invention comes along that redefines everything, or a new paradigm in social media comes along. But I think, what makes something like YouTube enduring, and it's been going for well over 15 years now, you've got a situation where, public access television is irrelevant. Fewer people are buying actual televisions, because a television, when you really get down to it, the only real innovations in televisions is how much lighter and larger the screen is. And, we're seeing globally a slowdown in television sales as opposed to things like laptop sales. Televisions have had to become essentially computers, so you can watch YouTube on your TV. But I was looking at the analytics this morning, and most people are watching YouTube, or most people are watching these videos on their phones, which is really cool. So you're no longer tethered. I remember how boring bus rides were, and I did go through a stage of always having a book with me when I was on a bus, and then when the Walkman came out in the early 80s, I had a Walkman with me and a constant search for batteries and running down and, you know, dead headphones and stuff like that. And it was very, very tedious. And now you've got a computer that fits in your pocket that lasts all day on a single charge. You pay pennies to recharge it. And the amount of things we can do with that. I mean, I could broadcast this as a live stream from my mobile phone. More on that later, because I've got some plans for that. So yeah, I would, you know, it is very interesting. You know, all the power that we have and how little we do with it. It's kind of incredible. So, you know, with that sort of thing in mind, what would we do? I mean, look at this. This is like absolutely amazing. Really nice place to come and have a wander. So yeah, what can we do? I mean, I'm doing this channel because I believe there's a place for genuinely useful media. You know, I want there to be lots of competent people running around the earth, you know, with plenty of things that they can do. I mean, there may come a time when actual jobs are hard to come by, and in order to stop riots and, you know, mass poverty that would cause, you know, political upheaval and mad levels of opposition to the status quo, I do believe that universal basic income will be a thing before I die. And for those of you who don't know, universal basic income is the idea that the government will give you a stipend every month, no questions asked, doesn't matter your level of income. But you'll just literally get a bank transfer every month for just about enough to live on, whoever you are. So in today's terms, I reckon that would be on the order of £800 to £1,000, so $1,000 to $1,200, roughly. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are. So I think what would happen is communal living would become a thing. You know, people will band together, rent a house, have a bedroom each, and then do interesting things with the money left over. But if we're looking at a situation where, you know, a laptop can cost you as little as 50 quid, you know, the relevant communications information and video recording and microphone stuff, you know, that's going to cost you, you know, another 50 quid, say. You know, if you're prepared to settle at 1080p for a video format, which is more than acceptable, then we're going to get a situation where, you know, you could get creative households where people are just making music and video and putting it on YouTube and seeking sort of sponsorship through that, which is pretty interesting. It's definitely going to be a different world. I mean, there will still be people with jobs, and there will still be a certain amount of political power in the masses, but nobody seems to want to form a political party based on the management of planet Earth, you know, sorting out world hunger, genuinely sorting out this stuff, stabilising the rest of the world so we can have a world economy. I mean, there's a lot of automation coming. You're getting generally intelligent machines that can be applied to almost any task. And we're finding more and more that the vast amount of computing power that we can lay our hands on right now is going to be a factor. It's going to make a lot of difference to all the various industries that we currently know about. There's going to be robots making things. There will be a kind of general intelligence. You're not going to have a job. So you're going to have to learn how to do what humans do best, be creative, write, film things, make music, make sculpture. I mean, there's nothing stopping anybody from making walk-through sculptures for an Oculus Rift with zero materials cost but a certain investment in time, like a fantastical park of artistic creations that you'll be able to walk around. I was watching, and it's a bad movie, Ready Player One, and it's almost like the technology to make it happen, to make that sort of scenario happen with an all immersive audio, visual, tactile multiverse that you can explore ad infinitum. That technology is kind of here. There's no limit on cyberspace apart from the hardware used to run it. I mean, we can already create procedurally generated universes that can remember their stuff as you explore it. So yeah, what will we do with that kind of power? And what will the majority of people do? It's kind of slippy. It's been raining a bit. So yeah, what will we do? And I'm telling you, the people that will call the shots in such an environment, if that comes to pass, are the people that can create new stuff that people want to see. So it's worth getting your art on. It's worth taking the time to really, really explore. But the first thing you got to do is shake off the shackles. You're treated like a consumer, a zero power consumer. And I think, one of the things that will come into effect and will come to pass. Interesting. Now check this out. There's almost a whole barrier where that tree's fallen over, slowing down the river. So yeah, I think what will come to pass is kind of like creative houses where people of various skill sets will recruit video editors and sound engineers and people with the requisite knowledge to produce the media that the team is wanting to produce. And media itself will have value. Maybe not a lot. I mean, it's a case of people deciding on how much disposable income they've got and people voting financially. Sort of like this, I'm kind of sponsored by your donations to keep this up. When I'm doing it for myself, I'm getting the feeling that people are learning from it, that people are seeing actual credible results, on things that they care about. Good nutrition, weight loss, exercise, psychological tools that will help you achieve stuff. I mean, I've got a quote by David Bowie up in my lounge that says, discipline is not mindlessly getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning, leaving the house by 8 and going to a 9-to-5 job every day. Discipline is about deciding what you're going to do and deciding that that's a good thing and following through. And I think we could all use the concept of, right, okay, this person or these people have just decided to stop being consumers and stop being couch potatoes and have got off their asses and gone and done something. Harlequin over in Australia is filming some of his runs, some of his wanders, and is coming up with some really interesting stuff. He's a really interesting guy. I've hung out with him twice in person when he was in the UK. Kind of hoping he'll pop back to the UK at some point relatively soonish. But yeah. But yes, or I'll have to go to Australia. Wouldn't that be interesting? Should this channel take off and I can suddenly afford to do stuff like that, go to Australia, meet people, go to America, meet other people. From my time doing Rangers Tube, and I think I'm going to put that in the links. I'm going to put a link to the Rangers Tube channel, which is what I was doing before I did this. Because a lot of the people that are featured on that and that are talked to on that are the kinds of people that could really change the world. Everybody mentioned on the credits page, they are all extremely interesting humans. They all reach for, a concept of things have got to be either more interesting or better, that a lot of people don't seem to know that they have. I think it's in everybody. I think that looking at things in a different way thing is a human trait. I think we've all got the ability to go, nah, there's a better way of doing this. But I think that's kind of like a mental muscle. If you don't use it, then it goes away. And what I would like is a planet full of people that know exactly how to tap into their creative side, can access tools that will help them, because you no longer need a music studio. You don't. You just don't. You need some foam, you need a relatively good microphone, you maybe need a video camera, and you need a laptop. So under £100 you can set up a studio and at least produce a credible demo of what it is you want to do. And the trick there is, and what I found with my stuff that I'm doing here and the stuff that I've done on other channels, is do something that you believe in. Now, it might not be the most profitable thing to do things that you believe in, has to be said, but doing something you believe in, it's important, and it makes it more authentic. People really do see it if you're doing something that you're totally into. And I like walking into the woods and thinking. So yeah, food for thought. The cost of doing this stuff is remarkably low. Get yourself down to a second-hand shop. Find yourself a laptop that has expandable memory. Rip off the operating system, get rid of it. Put Ubuntu on it. Install Audacity, which is a sound editor program. Install Kdenlive, video editing. Install OpenOffice or LibreOffice. It's all your productivity software right there. So the universe wants to give you the tools. A good, Samson Go mic. Simple USB microphone. You don't need any other audio interface. £20. A cheap action camera. Well, don't go for the really cheap ones because they're rubbish at the moment. But a reasonably cheap action camera shouldn't cost you more than £30. Get a memory upgrade. Another £25 will score you a 256 gigabyte thumb drive, so you can store your stuff. And then you're ready to go. Ooh. amazingly there are people in the woods. And I'm trying to avoid getting them on camera. I might have failed. But, yeah. So, I'm going to make some assumptions. And I'm doing it from a UK perspective. Okay, say the average wage in the UK is approximately £300 a month, or it's probably going to be about $360 US. That's like an average wage if you're working a full-time job. You know, your rent's going to take up half of that. So if you were to eat pretty sensibly, so you can eat for about a tenner a week if you're going to do it sensibly. If you're going to eat good food rather than takeaway crap. And you've got to pay like 125 of that, £300 in rent. You got some bills, local taxes and stuff. You'd still be left over, even if, like I do, even if you smoked, with about £100 a week. So from nothing, you could get a decent laptop, hook it up to the internet, download Ubuntu, because it's really easy to use. If anybody's got any suggestions for an extremely easy to use operating system in the Unix or Linux vein that is actually easy to use, because some of them are faster but they're horrendous, user experience wise. If you get something like that, that's why I say Ubuntu. Download Ubuntu, download all that other free software, and get yourself a single action camera, maybe like one of those microphone stands. You can mount an action camera to a microphone stand, so you can adjust like the scissor stands for microphones, and there's an upcoming video showing you that. If you can get all that together with a relatively decent microphone, and you can do it for about 100 quid, you've got a TV and music studio right there. You know, you're extremely there. There's even things like drum machines, synthesizers, virtual keyboards. You know, buying a MIDI instrument interface that plugs into a USB socket. You know, maybe 30, 40 quid. I've seen them really, really cheap these days. And you have an entire music studio with an orchestra for 150 quid. You could buy that all in one hit off eBay second hand. So from nothing in 1 week, if you shopped carefully and you were patient, you could get a reasonably good laptop. You want to get something that accepts more memory and will accept up to 8 gigabytes. But that's what the internet's for. That's why I rave on about the X and T series of Lenovo ThinkPads, because they just are good. They're just excellent. You know, they're fully upgradable. They'll take at least up to 16 gig of RAM, which is more than you need for video editing at the moment at 1080p. And if you can't tell a story in 1080p, you didn't have a good story. You know, 1080p is a higher resolution, a much higher resolution than the original Star Wars movies. Think about that. You know, it's essentially a DVD level resolution. Trying to avoid breaking off my train of thought. This is the problem. It's like this time of day, I think a lot of people are walking their dogs. I thought I'd be pretty safe this morning. So, take another little bit of a circuit around here. So yeah. So where would you go after you've gained all these superpowers? What would you do? Now you're getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning. You're making your bed, you're drinking your water. You're doing some exercise. You're meditating. You have a unique perspective on the lives of people on a planet that contains 7 billion people. There's only one of you. Which part of that one of you would resonate with a large number of other people? What are you going to do? Because You do all that, you get good nutrition, you get good exercise, you know, you open up your mind, you come up with, you think about new concepts and new ways to do things. What can't you do from a human perspective? What would you want to learn about? And I'd say that make that a meditative mantra. There's no genius required to create good video or good music, or invent something that can be made with cheap materials, or solving a problem, or repairing something. You don't need to be a genius to do that. Not now. You know, decades and decades ago, prior to the internet, you would need a level of genius to even comprehend something as complicated as a computer. But now they're everywhere. You don't need to understand it. You just need to know how to, you know, for want of a better word, weaponize it. You know, there's no way being able to do, you know, everything up to more, you know, fairly recent technology, and create imagery and sound and visuals and, you know, maybe even tactile feedback. You know, how difficult would it be to create, you know, a pair of haptic feedback gloves, given that the motors that would give you a sense of touch are probably about 50 pence each. So for the cost of a relatively sturdy pair of gloves, some haptic feedback lines, some gaffer tape, an Arduino, and a programming pack, you know, you could build haptic gloves. You could create a gesture-based navigation system with those haptic gloves based on tension sensors and stuff like that. Again, electronics are cheap. All you've got to do is register what the tension sensor feels, and it can tell how far, you know, you've moved that finger, or in what direction, or where your hands are, or stuff like that. And that technology's been, you know, researched for decades and decades. NASA was mucking about with it in the 1980s. By now, all their findings are public domain. There are probably lots of people on Earth that are trying to do that. Why wouldn't you be able to build it? Tie that in with a visual display and get some visual artists on it. Find out, or create a new programming nodule that allows you to tell when you're touching something in virtual space. I mean, imagine the freedom if you could create a virtual universe, or maybe even a procedural universe that interfaces with the real world. Imagine the benefits you're going to be able to give someone that's, say, disabled. You know, what if the visual feedback can be translated through to someone that's blind? You know, an augmented reality for a blind person using sonar. When you can build a sonar rig for about £4 with an Arduino. You can build sonar. I get the feeling that every time I say you can do this, people are looking at the screen and going, well, have you done it? And yeah, fair enough. I've tinkered with it. I think it's very, very interesting stuff. Maybe I need to do some videos on that, on the bonus video stuff, or put it on Ranger's Tube. So yeah. But, you know, I'm just learning how to do this. But I think that once you've got a situation where you're wanting to do stuff, you know, what I'm doing is making the space in your brain for you to want to do, to be able to do stuff, to think outside the box. Because I think it's the one thing that we all share as humans. We're all capable of it. Or most of us are capable of it. It's just that it's beaten out of us. You wake up, you eat your breakfast, you go to your crappy job, you break for lunch, you come back, you work after lunch till about 5 o'clock, then you come home. Then you sit and watch television for 3 or 4 hours, you eat a pizza, eat some ice cream, and then go to bed and do the same thing, and then on a weekend you just lounge in bed or go shopping to try and fill that void, which is never going to be filled by stuff. You'll get your initial dopamine hit, sure. You can go to IKEA as often as you like. You still ain't going to be happy as a result of going to IKEA. You're still not going to be happy because you bought something. You're just going to be one of those people that invested a lot of money in stuff. Why not buy tools? Why not buy the ability to do the widest variety of other stuff? If you've got a spare 50 or 60 quid, whoa, very slippy. If you've got that, start small. Buy a cheap laptop that has either got 4 gigabytes of RAM or has got the potentiality of being upgraded to 8 or 16 gig. You see a laptop in a pawn shop window, check it out online before you buy it. All right, okay, well, this laptop can take up to 16 gig. I'll get that. I'll install Linux on it. I'll install all the free software. And I'll see what I can make. That laptop's already got a video camera on it. There's nothing to say you can't use a webcam to make your first few videos. Use OBS, which is online broadcast system. That's an amazing piece of software. Essentially gives you a television studio to work with. It'll even use your onboard microphone and webcam on the laptop if it needs to. But yeah, experiment, try stuff. You can now buy a reasonably good laptop for the cost of, an evening out drinking beer, or the money that you would have spent on crappy food that week. You can get a laptop. These things were once thousands of pounds. They were in excess of a month's salary. I had to save up. I had to have major injections of cash in order to buy my first laptop. Now they're dirt cheap. I bought one laptop for the last 3 laptops that I've bought, and 2 of them were for other people. One was a Lenovo ThinkPad T410 for £80. I bought 2 X230s, one for £54 and one for £62. And one of those X230s already had 8 gig of RAM on it. So be patient. Be a retail sniper. Go into a second-hand shop, browse around at stuff, check out what you're buying. The reason I recommend the Lenovo's ones is because they're very expandable and there's a lot of accessories like a docking station, so you can attach a larger monitor. So you can have a double screen monitor, which is very handy for video editing. And do it. Play with it. You can get a 19-inch monitor for a tenner. This stuff is amazingly cheap. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Where would you go from being, an upgraded human? Well, you go and create stuff. That's what you do. So that's enough of my rant. I've had a good wander around the woods. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, please do take care.